Question 1. Research into Kansas City Police Department, KCPD, protocols and Kansas law indicates that officers are patrolling a public park in Kansas City, Missouri, after dark. They observe two individuals sitting on a park bench, speaking in hushed tones and occasionally looking around. The officers have no other information about these individuals or any reported criminal activity in the park. What is the most appropriate course of action for the KCPD officers? Option A. Continue observing from a distance without any direct interaction, assuming the individuals are engaged in lawful activity. Option B. Conduct a pat-down search of the individuals for weapons based on the observation of hushed tones and looking around. Option C. Immediately demand identification from the individuals and question them about their activities, citing the late hour and their hushed conversation as suspicious. Option D. Approach the individuals to politely inquire about their identities and the reason for their presence in the park, while clearly stating the officers are there to ensure public safety. Correct answer is D. Approach the individuals to politely inquire about their identities and the reason for their presence in the park, while clearly stating the officers are there to ensure public safety. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the KCPD duty to uphold the law and the potential for a citizen's right to privacy and freedom of movement. Officers must exercise sound judgment to balance these competing interests, ensuring their actions are lawful, reasonable, and respectful of individual rights, while effectively performing their duties. The specific context of a public park at night, coupled with the observation of potentially suspicious but not definitively illegal behavior, requires careful consideration of established legal standards and departmental policy. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves approaching the individuals to ascertain their identity and the purpose of their presence, while clearly articulating the reason for the interaction. This approach is correct because it aligns with the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable searches and seizures, as interpreted by Supreme Court precedent. Officers can initiate a brief investigatory stop, a Terry stop, if they have a reasonable, articulable suspicion that criminal activity may be afoot. This suspicion must be based on specific facts and rational inferences, not mere hunches or generalized suspicion. By approaching and asking questions, officers are gathering information to determine if reasonable suspicion exists, thereby justifying any further action. This also respects the individual's right to be free from unwarranted governmental intrusion. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately demanding identification and questioning the individuals about their activities without any articulable suspicion of criminal activity. This fails to meet the legal standard for a lawful stop and risks violating the individual's Fourth Amendment rights. It is an overreach of authority based on a generalized suspicion rather than specific, objective facts. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the situation entirely, even if the observed behavior, while not overtly illegal, raises a legitimate concern for officer safety or community well-being. While officers must respect privacy, they also have a duty to investigate suspicious circumstances that could indicate impending criminal activity or a threat to public safety. A complete lack of engagement in such a scenario could be seen as dereliction of duty if the circumstances later reveal a missed opportunity to prevent a crime. A third incorrect approach is to conduct a full search of the individuals or their belongings without probable cause or a warrant. This is a significant violation of constitutional rights and would be considered an unlawful search and seizure. The observed behavior, as described, does not rise to the level of probable cause required for a search. Professional reasoning. In situations like this, officers should employ a tiered approach to intervention. First, observe and assess the situation for any objective indicators of criminal activity or danger. Second, if reasonable suspicion exists, initiate a brief, non-intrusive investigatory stop to gather information and clarify the circumstances. Third, based on the information gathered, determine if probable cause exists for further action, such as an arrest or search. Throughout this process, officers must remain professional, respectful, and mindful of constitutional rights and departmental policies. Documentation of observations and actions is crucial. Question 2. Which approach would be most appropriate for a Kansas City Police Department officer who arrives at a scene where a witness to a recent robbery is present and appears distressed, but has not yet been formally detained or arrested? Option A. Gently encourage the witness to speak by assuring them that anything they say will be kept confidential and will not be used against them. Option B. Secure the scene. Ensure the witness's immediate safety, and then clearly inform the witness of their rights before asking any questions related to the incident. Option C. Immediately begin questioning the witness about what they saw to gather crucial details about the suspect and the crime. Option D. Detain the witness for an extended period to ensure they do not leave the scene before detectives arrive, without initially advising them of any rights. The correct answer is B. Secure the scene, ensure the witness's immediate safety, and then clearly inform the witness of their rights before asking any questions related to the incident. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an officer to balance the immediate need for information with the legal rights of an individual and the integrity of a potential investigation. The officer must act swiftly, but also within the bounds of established legal precedent and departmental policy. The core tension lies in obtaining potentially crucial evidence without violating constitutional protections against unreasonable searches and seizures, or coercing a confession. The best approach involves securing the scene and ensuring the safety of all involved, then clearly informing the individual of their rights before any questioning begins. This aligns with the fundamental principles of due process and the Fifth Amendment protections against self-incrimination, as codified in Kansas law and reinforced by landmark U.S. Supreme Court decisions like Miranda v. Arizona. By advising the individual of their Miranda rights, the officer respects their right to remain silent and their right to legal counsel, ensuring any subsequent statements are voluntary and admissible. This methodical approach preserves the integrity of the investigation and protects the department from legal challenges. An incorrect approach would be to immediately question the individual about the incident without advising them of their rights. This directly violates the Miranda rule, rendering any statements obtained potentially inadmissible in court. It also demonstrates a disregard for the individual's constitutional rights, which can lead to severe legal repercussions for the officer and the department, and damage public trust. Another incorrect approach would be to detain the individual for an extended period without probable cause or a warrant, solely to gather information. This could constitute an unlawful seizure and detention, infringing upon the individual's Fourth Amendment rights. Prolonged detention without legal justification can lead to civil liability and undermine the legitimacy of law enforcement actions. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to use any form of coercion or intimidation to elicit information. This is not only ethically reprehensible, but also a clear violation of due process, and can lead to the suppression of evidence, disciplinary action against the officer, and criminal charges. Law enforcement must operate with integrity and respect for individual liberties. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes constitutional rights and legal procedures. This involves 1. Assessing the immediate situation for safety concerns. 2. Identifying the legal basis for any detention or search. 3. Understanding and applying relevant legal warnings like Miranda. And 4. Documenting all actions meticulously. When in doubt, consulting with a supervisor or legal counsel is paramount. Question 3. The evaluation methodology shows that upon arriving at a reported domestic disturbance at a residence in Kansas City, Missouri, officers observe signs of a struggle, including overturned furniture and broken items. One party, visibly distressed, claims the other initiated the physical altercation. The other party denies this, stating they were acting in self-defense. What is the most appropriate initial course of action for the Kansas City Police Department officers? Option A. Immediately arrest the individual who appears more agitated and is making the initial accusation based on the visible signs of a struggle. Option B. Attempt to mediate the dispute between the parties on the spot to de-escalate the situation before any further action is taken. Option C. Focus solely on interviewing the party who appears to be the victim and disregard the statements of the other party until further investigation. Option D. Secure the scene, separate the individuals for individual interviews, and assess for injuries and evidence of a struggle. Then determine probable cause for arrest based on Missouri law and KCPD policy. The correct answer is D. Secure the scene, separate the individuals for individual interviews, and assess for injuries and evidence of a struggle. Then determine probable cause for arrest based on Missouri law and KCPD policy. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that officers responding to a domestic disturbance call in Kansas City, Missouri, face a complex and rapidly evolving situation. The primary challenge lies in de-escalating the conflict, ensuring the safety of all parties involved, including potential victims, the aggressor, and the officers themselves, while adhering to departmental policies and Missouri law. The urgency and potential for violence necessitate immediate, yet measured, action. The best approach involves a systematic and safety-first response. This includes establishing a secure perimeter, clearly identifying and separating the involved parties, and conducting individual interviews to gather factual information. Officers must actively listen, observe nonverbal cues, and remain objective. The Kansas City Police Department's general orders and Missouri revised statutes regarding domestic violence and the use of force are paramount. Specifically, officers are mandated to investigate all domestic violence calls and gather evidence, which may include interviewing witnesses and victims and documenting injuries. The decision to arrest must be based on probable cause, considering factors such as visible injuries, witness statements, and admissions, in accordance with Missouri's mandatory arrest laws for domestic assault. This approach prioritizes victim safety, evidence preservation, and legal compliance. An incorrect approach would be to make an arrest solely based on one party's accusation without conducting a thorough investigation or gathering corroborating evidence. This fails to comply with the probable cause standard required for arrest under Missouri law and departmental policy, potentially leading to wrongful arrest and undermining public trust. Another incorrect approach is to attempt to mediate the dispute on the spot without adequately assessing the safety of the situation or the potential for ongoing violence. This neglects the primary duty to protect individuals from harm and may escalate the situation, violating departmental guidelines on handling domestic disturbances which emphasize officer safety and victim protection. Finally, failing to document all observations, statements, and actions taken during the incident is a significant procedural and ethical failure. This omission hinders subsequent investigations, potential prosecution, and internal review, and is contrary to KCPD record-keeping requirements. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with immediate threat assessment and safety prioritization. This is followed by information gathering through observation and interviewing, applying relevant legal standards, Missouri revised statutes, and departmental policies, KCPD general orders, to determine probable cause for arrest and meticulous documentation of all findings and actions. Question 4. System analysis indicates a KCPD officer observes a fellow officer during a critical evidence collection process in Kansas City, Missouri, subtly alter a piece of evidence to exclude potentially exculpatory information before it is logged. The observing officer is aware of the KCPD Code of Conduct and Missouri revised statutes regarding evidence tampering and official misconduct. What is the most ethically and legally sound course of action for the observing officer? Option A. Immediately and discreetly report the observed evidence tampering to the KCPD Internal Affairs Division or a designated supervisor, ensuring the incident is formally documented for investigation. Option B. Confront the colleague privately about their actions, urging them to correct the evidence tampering before it is officially logged. Option C. Ignore the observed evidence tampering to avoid interdepartmental conflict and maintain collegial relationships. Option D. Discuss the observed evidence tampering with other officers to gauge their opinions before deciding on a course of action. The correct answer is A. Immediately and discreetly report the observed evidence tampering to the KCPD Internal Affairs Division or a designated supervisor, ensuring the incident is formally documented for investigation. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the inherent conflict between a sworn duty to uphold the law and the personal knowledge of a potential violation by a colleague. This situation demands careful judgment because it requires balancing loyalty to the department and colleagues with the absolute imperative of integrity and adherence to the Kansas City Police Department's KCPD Code of Conduct and Missouri state law regarding official misconduct and evidence tampering. The KCPD operates under a strict ethical framework that prioritizes public trust and lawful conduct. The best professional approach involves immediately and discreetly reporting the observed evidence tampering to the appropriate Internal Affairs Division or supervisor. As mandated by KCPD policy and Missouri statutes, concerning reporting of criminal activity by law enforcement officers. This approach is correct because it upholds the principle of accountability, ensures the integrity of the judicial process by preventing tainted evidence from being used, and demonstrates a commitment to the highest ethical standards expected of KCPD officers. Reporting through official channels ensures a thorough and impartial investigation, protecting both the public and the integrity of the department. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the observed evidence tampering. This failure is professionally unacceptable because it constitutes a dereliction of duty and tacit approval of illegal activity. By not reporting, the officer becomes complicit in the obstruction of justice, violating KCPD policy and Missouri revised statutes concerning official misconduct and hindering prosecution. Another incorrect approach would be to confront the colleague directly and privately without reporting, seemingly an attempt to resolve the issue internally. This bypasses established KCPD procedures for investigating misconduct and evidence tampering. It risks the destruction of further evidence, allows the colleague to potentially cover their tracks, and fails to initiate the formal accountability process required by law and departmental policy. This approach undermines the investigative authority of internal affairs and the integrity of the evidence. A further incorrect approach would be to report the incident to a supervisor outside of the designated internal affairs channel without ensuring it is formally documented and investigated. This could lead to the information being mishandled, lost, or dismissed without proper due process, again failing to uphold the officer's duty to report and ensure accountability. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of departmental policies and relevant state laws. When faced with observed misconduct, an officer should first identify the specific policy or law being violated. Then, they should consult their training and departmental procedures for reporting such violations. The priority must always be to preserve the integrity of the investigation and uphold public trust, which necessitates reporting through the established, official channels designed for such serious matters. Question 5. System analysis indicates that a Kansas City Police Department officer observes a vehicle traveling significantly over the posted speed limit on a Kansas City street. Upon initiating a traffic stop, the officer recognizes the driver as a former acquaintance from a community event. The officer knows this individual casually and has no ongoing personal or professional relationship beyond this past acquaintance. The driver appears surprised to see the officer. What is the most appropriate course of action for the officer to take? Option A. Engage in extended, friendly conversation with the driver during the stop, downplaying the severity of the speeding violation to maintain a positive personal connection. Option B. Immediately terminate the traffic stop and allow the driver to proceed, citing the personal acquaintance as a reason to avoid potential awkwardness or perceived bias. Option C. Conduct the traffic stop in a professional and objective manner, documenting all observations and actions according to KCPD policy and Kansas law, without any special consideration due to the acquaintance. Option D. Issue a verbal warning for the speeding violation, regardless of the objective evidence of the infraction, to avoid escalating the situation with a known individual. The correct answer is C. Conduct the traffic stop in a professional and objective manner, documenting all observations and actions according to KCPD policy and Kansas law, without any special consideration due to the acquaintance. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the inherent tension between departmental policy, public trust, and the potential for personal bias influencing official actions. Officers are entrusted with discretion, but this discretion must be exercised within strict ethical and legal boundaries, particularly when dealing with individuals who may have personal connections to them. The Kansas City Police Department, KCPD, operates under a framework that emphasizes impartiality, accountability, and the avoidance of even the appearance of impropriety. The best approach involves a scrupulous adherence to established KCPD policy and state law regarding traffic stops and the handling of potential conflicts of interest. This means conducting the traffic stop as any other, documenting all observations and actions objectively, and refraining from any special treatment or leniency based on the personal relationship. The officer must prioritize their duty to enforce traffic laws fairly and impartially, recognizing that any deviation could undermine public confidence in the KCPD and potentially violate departmental regulations concerning conduct and conflicts of interest. This approach upholds the principle of equal application of the law and maintains professional integrity. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the stop due to the personal acquaintance. This failure to act would violate the officer's duty to enforce traffic laws and could be construed as favoritism, eroding public trust and potentially leading to disciplinary action for dereliction of duty or conduct unbecoming an officer. Another incorrect approach would be to issue a warning solely based on the personal relationship, without a thorough and objective assessment of the traffic violation. This constitutes preferential treatment, which is ethically unsound and likely violates KCPD policy on fair and impartial enforcement. It creates an unequal application of the law and can lead to perceptions of corruption or bias. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to engage in overly friendly conversation during the stop, downplaying the seriousness of the infraction or making light of the situation. While maintaining a professional demeanor is important, excessive familiarity can blur the lines between professional duty and personal relationship, leading to the appearance of impropriety and a failure to conduct the stop with the necessary seriousness and objectivity. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to policy and law, objective assessment of facts, and the avoidance of personal bias. When a potential conflict of interest arises, such as encountering an acquaintance, the professional should err on the side of caution, ensuring all actions are transparent, justifiable, and consistent with the highest ethical standards and departmental regulations. This involves a conscious effort to compartmentalize personal relationships from professional duties. Question 6. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a Kansas City Police Department officer, while on duty, is approached by a local business owner who is aware of an impending, non-public investigation into their establishment. The business owner, in an attempt to influence the officer, offers a substantial personal financial benefit. What is the most appropriate course of action for the officer? Option A. Immediately cease all interaction with the business owner, make no commitments, and formally report the encounter and the offer to a supervisor as soon as possible. Option B. Engage in further discussion with the business owner to understand the full scope of their offer and potential benefits. Option C. Politely decline the offer but take no further action, assuming the business owner will not pursue the matter further. Option D. Accept the financial benefit and inform the supervisor of the offer at a later date, after the investigation has concluded. The correct answer is A. Immediately cease all interaction with the business owner, make no commitments, and formally report the encounter and the offer to a supervisor as soon as possible. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Kansas City Police Department KCPD officer due to the inherent conflict between departmental policy, the public trust, and the potential for personal gain or bias. The officer's knowledge of an impending, non-public investigation into a local business owner, coupled with the owner's offer of a significant personal benefit, creates a situation where ethical conduct and adherence to KCPD regulations are paramount. The officer must navigate the temptation of personal enrichment against their sworn duty to uphold the law and maintain departmental integrity. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately and formally reporting the encounter and the offer to a supervisor, without accepting any benefit or making any commitments. This approach is correct because it aligns with KCPD Code of Conduct and Missouri state law regarding public corruption and bribery. Specifically, KCPD policy mandates that officers report any attempts at bribery or undue influence. By reporting the incident, the officer initiates the proper internal investigation process, preserves evidence, and demonstrates an unwavering commitment to ethical standards and the rule of law. This action protects the integrity of the KCPD and ensures that any potential investigation into the business owner is conducted impartially and without interference. Incorrect approaches analysis. Accepting the offer and delaying reporting would be a direct violation of KCPD policy and Missouri statutes concerning bribery and official misconduct. This action compromises the officer's integrity, creates a conflict of interest, and could taint any future investigation into the business owner, undermines public trust in law enforcement. Discussing the investigation further with the business owner to gauge the extent of the offer, even without accepting it, could be construed as an attempt to solicit or negotiate a bribe, which is illegal and unethical. It also risks inadvertently revealing sensitive information about the ongoing investigation, potentially hindering its progress and violating departmental confidentiality protocols. Ignoring the offer and continuing with routine duties without reporting it is a failure to uphold the officer's duty to report misconduct and potential corruption. This inaction allows a corrupting influence to persist and potentially go unaddressed, which is a dereliction of duty and a breach of public trust. It suggests a willingness to overlook unethical behavior, which is contrary to the principles of law enforcement. Professional reasoning. Professionals in law enforcement should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to departmental policy, legal statutes, and ethical principles. When faced with a situation involving a potential conflict of interest or an offer of personal benefit, the immediate step should be to disengage from the compromising situation, avoid making any commitments or accepting any benefits, and promptly report the encounter and the offer to the appropriate supervisory authority. This process ensures transparency, accountability, and the preservation of professional integrity. Question 7. Cost-benefit analysis shows that obtaining a confession quickly could significantly aid in solving a high-profile crime in Kansas City, Missouri. However, during questioning, the suspect clearly states, "I don't want to talk anymore, and I want to speak to a lawyer." What is the most appropriate course of action for the KCPD officer? Option A. Inform the suspect that their request for a lawyer will delay the investigation and ask them to reconsider speaking now. Option B. Ask the suspect if they are sure they want a lawyer, suggesting they might be able to resolve the matter more quickly by speaking directly to the officer. Option C. Immediately cease all questioning and document the suspect's invocation of their rights, then consult with a supervisor. Option D. Continue questioning the suspect, explaining their confession would be beneficial for their case and might lead to a lighter sentence. The correct answer is C. Immediately cease all questioning and document the suspect's invocation of their rights, then consult with a supervisor. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge for a Kansas City Police Department, KCPD officer because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the constitutional rights of an individual and departmental policy. The officer must make a judgment call under pressure, considering the potential consequences of their actions on the investigation, the individual's rights, and the integrity of the KCPD. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any information obtained is admissible and that the officer's conduct aligns with legal and ethical standards. The best approach involves prioritizing the constitutional rights of the individual while still pursuing legitimate investigative avenues. This means understanding and respecting the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and the Sixth Amendment right to counsel. When an individual invokes their right to remain silent or requests an attorney, all questioning must cease immediately. The officer should then document the invocation of these rights and consult with a supervisor or legal counsel regarding next steps. This approach is correct because it upholds fundamental legal protections guaranteed to all citizens, as established by the U.S. Constitution and reinforced by KCPD policy and Missouri law. Adherence to these rights is paramount to maintaining the integrity of the investigation and preventing the suppression of evidence. An incorrect approach would be to continue questioning the individual after they have invoked their right to remain silent. This directly violates the Fifth Amendment and would render any subsequent statements inadmissible in court. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the individual's request for an attorney. This infringes upon the Sixth Amendment right to counsel and would also lead to the suppression of evidence. Furthermore, attempting to circumvent these rights by, for example, speaking to the individual in a non-custodial setting after they have invoked their rights, or by using coercive tactics, would be ethically and legally unacceptable, undermining public trust and the principles of justice. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core legal and ethical principles at play. This involves recognizing the individual's constitutional rights and understanding departmental policies. When faced with a situation where these rights are invoked, the immediate and unwavering response should be to cease questioning. If there is ambiguity, seeking guidance from a supervisor or legal advisor is crucial. Documentation of all interactions and decisions is also a critical component of professional conduct. Question 8. System analysis indicates that a Kansas City Police Department, KCPD, officer, while off-duty, encounters a close personal friend who is involved in a situation that may warrant a police investigation. The officer knows this individual well and has a long-standing friendship. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action for the officer to take regarding this situation and their involvement, considering KCPD commitment to impartiality and public trust? Option A. Avoid any direct involvement and simply leave the scene without reporting anything, assuming another officer will handle the situation without any knowledge of the officer's personal connection. Option B. Proceed with a preliminary assessment of the situation independently, believing their personal integrity will ensure objectivity, and only report the relationship if the investigation escalates significantly. Option C. Inform their supervisor of the personal relationship, but proceed with initial investigative steps, believing they can remain impartial, and that their knowledge of the friend will aid the investigation. Option D. Immediately report the personal relationship and the potential investigative situation to their direct supervisor, requesting guidance on how to proceed and potentially recusing themselves from any involvement. The correct answer is D. Immediately report the personal relationship and the potential investigative situation to their direct supervisor, requesting guidance on how to proceed and potentially recusing themselves from any involvement. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a personal relationship and the duty to uphold departmental integrity and impartiality. The officer's close friendship with the individual involved in a potential investigation creates a significant ethical dilemma, as it could compromise their objectivity and the fairness of any subsequent actions. Maintaining public trust in the Kansas City Police Department, KCPD, requires officers to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. The best approach involves immediate and transparent disclosure of the personal relationship to a supervisor. This upholds the KCPD commitment to ethical conduct and the principles of impartiality and accountability. By informing their supervisor, the officer ensures that the investigation can proceed without any perceived bias, allowing for appropriate reassignment if necessary. This action directly aligns with the KCPD internal policies regarding conflicts of interest and the Missouri Peace Officer Standards and Training, POST, Commission's ethical guidelines, which emphasize integrity, honesty, and the avoidance of situations that could impair professional judgment. Failing to disclose the relationship and proceeding with the investigation, even with the belief of maintaining objectivity, is professionally unacceptable. This approach violates the ethical principle of impartiality and creates a significant risk of actual or perceived bias, undermining the credibility of the KCPD. It also contravenes departmental regulations that mandate reporting of potential conflicts of interest. Another unacceptable approach is to delay reporting the relationship until after the initial stages of the investigation. This still carries the risk of subconscious bias influencing early decisions and creates a situation where the officer may be perceived as having attempted to conceal the conflict, further eroding trust. Transparency requires prompt disclosure. Finally, attempting to handle the situation independently without informing a supervisor, believing personal integrity is sufficient, ignores the departmental structure designed to safeguard against conflicts of interest and maintain public confidence. It places an undue burden on the individual officer to navigate a situation that has broader implications for the department's reputation and the integrity of its investigative processes. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, adherence to departmental policy, and the preservation of public trust. When faced with a potential conflict of interest, the immediate step should be to identify the conflict, assess its potential impact on objectivity, and report it to the appropriate supervisory authority for guidance and action. This proactive and transparent approach is crucial for maintaining ethical standards and ensuring fair and impartial law enforcement. Question 9. Quality control measures reveal that a Kansas City Police Department officer, while on routine patrol, observed an individual discard a small, unmarked plastic baggie. The officer, based on prior experience, strongly suspects the baggie contains illegal narcotics. The officer retrieves the baggie, but believing it to be a minor offense and wanting to avoid paperwork, considers simply discarding it in a nearby trash receptacle without further documentation or submission for testing. What is the most appropriate course of action for the officer to take? Option A. Discard the suspected contraband in a public trash receptacle to avoid unnecessary paperwork and potential escalation of the situation. Option B. Secure the suspected contraband according to KCPD evidence handling policy, document the observation and seizure, and submit the item for laboratory analysis. Option C. Discuss the contents of the suspected contraband with other officers on patrol to gauge their opinions before deciding on further action. Option D. Retain the suspected contraband for personal review and potential use in future training scenarios without formal submission. Correct answer is B. Secure the suspected contraband according to KCPD evidence handling policy, document the observation and seizure, and submit the item for laboratory analysis. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a perceived need for immediate action and the established protocols designed to ensure fairness, accuracy, and accountability within the Kansas City Police Department, KCPD. The officer is faced with a situation where personal observation suggests a violation, but the established procedures for evidence collection and reporting are critical to the integrity of any subsequent action. Careful judgment is required to balance the urgency of the situation with the department's commitment to due process and lawful investigation. The best professional approach involves adhering strictly to KCPD policy regarding the handling of suspected contraband. This means securing the item in a manner that preserves its integrity and chain of custody, documenting the observation and seizure according to departmental guidelines, and submitting it for proper analysis. This approach is correct because it upholds the legal and ethical standards of evidence handling, ensuring that any subsequent actions taken by the KCPD are based on verifiable facts and admissible evidence. It respects the rights of the individual and maintains the credibility of the department by following established procedures designed to prevent bias and error. An incorrect approach would be to immediately dispose of the suspected contraband without proper documentation or analysis, based on the officer's personal belief about its nature. This fails to uphold the principle of due process and the requirement for objective evidence. It bypasses the necessary steps for verification and could lead to a wrongful accusation or, conversely, the failure to address a genuine criminal act. Another incorrect approach would be to retain the suspected contraband for personal examination or to use it for training purposes without following the strict chain of custody protocols. This compromises the integrity of potential evidence, violates departmental policy on evidence handling, and could lead to accusations of tampering or misuse of seized items. Finally, an approach that involves discussing the suspected contraband with unauthorized personnel before it has been properly processed and documented would also be professionally unacceptable, as it risks compromising the investigation and violating privacy or confidentiality rules. Professionals in law enforcement should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and procedures, even when faced with seemingly straightforward situations. This framework involves 1. Recognizing the situation and identifying potential violations. 2. Recalling and applying relevant departmental policies and legal statutes. 3. Documenting all observations and actions meticulously. 4. Securing and preserving any potential evidence according to strict protocols. And 5. Consulting with supervisors or legal counsel when in doubt about the proper course of action. This systematic approach ensures that actions are lawful, ethical, and contribute to the overall integrity of the justice system. Question 10. System analysis indicates that a Kansas City Police Department, KCPD, officer is tasked with recommending a vendor for new body-worn cameras. The officer is aware of a specific model that meets all technical requirements and is offered by a company whose owner is a close personal friend. The officer needs to determine the most appropriate course of action to ensure an ethical and compliant procurement process. If the total estimated cost for the cameras is $50,000, and the officer's friend's company offers a price that is 10% higher than the average of 3 other competitive bids, what mathematical calculation is most relevant to assessing the financial impact of potentially selecting the friend's company? Option A. Calculate the standard deviation of the 4 bids. Option B. Calculate the absolute difference in cost between the friend's company bid and the average of the other bids. Option C. Calculate the simple average of all 4 bids. Option D. Calculate the percentage of the total budget that the friend's company bid represents. The correct answer is B. Calculate the absolute difference in cost between the friend's company bid and the average of the other bids. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a department's need for essential equipment and the ethical imperative to ensure fair and transparent procurement processes. The officer is placed in a position where personal relationships could influence official decisions, potentially leading to favoritism, waste of public funds, and a breach of public trust. The requirement for a specific type of equipment, coupled with a known vendor who is a personal acquaintance, necessitates careful navigation of KCPD policies and ethical standards to maintain integrity. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a transparent and documented process that mitigates any perceived or actual conflict of interest. This means formally declaring the personal relationship to a supervisor and recusing oneself from any part of the procurement process, including vendor selection, negotiation, and recommendation. This approach aligns with the ethical principles of impartiality, accountability, and the avoidance of impropriety. By stepping aside, the officer ensures that the KCPD procurement decisions are based solely on merit, cost-effectiveness, and departmental needs, rather than personal connections. This upholds the integrity of the department and public funds. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the recommendation of the acquaintance's company without disclosure. This is ethically unsound as it creates an appearance of impropriety and potentially violates KCPD policies regarding conflicts of interest. It bypasses the required checks and balances designed to ensure fair competition and the best use of taxpayer money. Another incorrect approach is to subtly steer the procurement towards the acquaintance's company through selective information sharing or downplaying alternatives, even if no direct financial benefit is received. This constitutes a breach of professional duty and ethical conduct by prioritizing personal relationships over objective evaluation and departmental best interests. It undermines the fairness of the procurement process. A further incorrect approach is to ignore the need for the specific equipment altogether due to the personal connection, thereby potentially compromising the department's operational effectiveness. While avoiding a conflict, this inaction fails to serve the department's legitimate needs and could be seen as an abdication of responsibility. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such dilemmas should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, adherence to policy, and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Identifying the potential conflict of interest. 2. Consulting relevant KCPD policies and ethical guidelines. 3. Disclosing the relationship to the appropriate authority supervisor. 4. Recusing oneself from any decision-making or influence related to the procurement. 5. Documenting all actions taken. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are made in the best interest of the department and the public, while safeguarding personal and professional integrity. Question 11. Governance review demonstrates that a Kansas City Police Department KCPD officer is ordered by a superior officer to dispose of a piece of evidence that is crucial to an ongoing investigation, with the superior officer stating it would make things easier. The officer knows this action directly contradicts KCPD policy on evidence handling and chain of custody. What is the most appropriate course of action for the officer? Option A. Lightly refuse the order, explain the violation of KCPD evidence handling policy, and immediately report the superior officer's request to the KCPD Internal Affairs Division. Option B. Dispose of the evidence as ordered but keep silent about the superior officer's request to avoid further complications. Option C. Dispose of the evidence as ordered by the superior officer to avoid conflict and potential repercussions. Option D. Confront the superior officer aggressively, refuse the order outright, and demand an explanation for the improper request. The correct answer is A. Politely refuse the order, explain the violation of KCPD evidence handling policy, and immediately report the superior officer's request to the KCPD Internal Affairs Division. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it pits a direct order from a superior against a potential ethical violation and a breach of departmental policy regarding evidence handling. The officer is placed in a position where refusing a direct order could lead to disciplinary action, yet complying could compromise the integrity of an investigation and violate established procedures designed to ensure fairness and accuracy in the justice system. The need for careful judgment arises from the imperative to uphold both the chain of command and the fundamental principles of due process and evidence integrity. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves politely but firmly refusing the direct order and immediately reporting the superior officer's request to the appropriate internal affairs or supervisory authority. This approach is correct because it prioritizes adherence to established Kansas City Police Department, KCPD, policies and procedures regarding evidence handling, which are designed to maintain the integrity of investigations and prevent tampering or contamination. Reporting the incident to the proper channels ensures that the matter is addressed through official review, protecting both the officer and the integrity of the legal process. This aligns with the ethical obligation of all law enforcement officers to uphold the law and departmental regulations, even when faced with pressure from superiors. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to comply with the superior officer's request to dispose of the evidence. This is professionally unacceptable because it directly violates KCPD policy on evidence preservation and chain of custody. Such an action would constitute obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, and a severe breach of ethical conduct, undermining the credibility of the investigation and potentially leading to the dismissal of charges against the suspect. Another incorrect approach is to dispose of the evidence as ordered, but to remain silent about it. This is also professionally unacceptable, as it involves complicity in an unethical and illegal act. While it might seem like a way to avoid direct confrontation, it still represents a failure to uphold departmental policy and ethical standards. The officer would be aware of a compromised investigation and would have failed to report it, making them liable for disciplinary action and potentially contributing to a miscarriage of justice. A third incorrect approach is to immediately confront the superior officer aggressively and refuse the order without offering a professional alternative or reporting mechanism. While refusing the order is correct, the manner of refusal is crucial. An aggressive confrontation can escalate the situation unnecessarily and may not lead to the desired outcome of ensuring proper procedure is followed. A professional approach involves clear communication of policy and a commitment to following the correct channels for resolution. Professional reasoning. Professionals in law enforcement should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies, ethical guidelines, and the law. When faced with a conflict between a direct order and these principles, the framework dictates: 1. Identify the conflict. Recognize when an order contradicts policy or ethical standards. 2. Consult policy. Refer to departmental regulations and procedures. 3. Communicate professionally. Clearly articulate concerns and the relevant policy to the superior officer. 4. Propose correct action. Suggest the proper procedure for handling the situation. 5. Escalate if necessary. If the superior officer insists on the improper action, report the situation to the next level of supervision or internal affairs. 6. Document everything. Keep a record of the interaction and actions taken. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are grounded in established protocols and ethical considerations, protecting both the individual officer and the integrity of the organization. Question 12. System analysis indicates that a Kansas City Police Department officer, while on patrol in Kansas City, Missouri, observes a vehicle exhibiting clear signs of a traffic violation. Upon initiating a traffic stop and approaching the vehicle, the officer recognizes the driver as a close personal friend. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action for the officer to take in this situation? Adhering to KCPD guidelines and Kansas law. Option A. Immediately disengage from the traffic stop and notify a supervisor of the personal relationship and the need for another officer to handle the situation. Option B. Discreetly end the traffic stop without issuing any citation or warning, citing a minor equipment issue that is not a violation. Option C. Proceed with the traffic stop as normal, making a conscious effort to be exceptionally fair and objective, ensuring no preferential treatment is given. Option D. Continue with the traffic stop, but privately inform the friend of the violation and offer to overlook it in exchange for future cooperation. The correct answer is A. Immediately disengage from the traffic stop and notify a supervisor of the personal relationship and the need for another officer to handle the situation. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a personal relationship and the duty to uphold departmental integrity and impartiality. The officer's close friendship with the individual involved in the traffic stop creates a significant ethical dilemma, as it could compromise their objectivity and the fair application of Kansas law. Maintaining public trust in the Kansas City Police Department, KCPD, requires officers to act without bias, regardless of personal connections. The best approach involves immediately recognizing the conflict of interest and taking steps to mitigate it by recusing oneself from the situation. This approach prioritizes departmental policy, ethical conduct, and the principle of impartiality. Specifically, it aligns with the KCPD internal guidelines and the broader ethical standards expected of law enforcement officers in Kansas, which mandate avoiding situations where personal relationships could influence professional judgment or create the appearance of impropriety. By disengaging from the stop and notifying a supervisor, the officer upholds their duty to serve the public without prejudice and ensures that the traffic stop is handled by an unbiased officer, thereby preserving the integrity of the legal process and public confidence in the KCPD. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the traffic stop as usual, attempting to be extra fair or lenient due to the friendship. This is professionally unacceptable because it still involves the officer in a situation where their impartiality is compromised. Even with the best intentions, the appearance of favoritism or undue leniency can erode public trust and potentially lead to accusations of misconduct or preferential treatment, violating the principles of equal protection under Kansas law and KCPD Code of Conduct. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the friendship and treat the individual as any other citizen without any special consideration. While seemingly neutral, this fails to acknowledge the potential for subconscious bias or the perception of bias by the individual or any witnesses. The ethical obligation extends to proactively managing situations that could reasonably lead to a conflict of interest, not just avoiding overt misconduct. This approach neglects the proactive duty to maintain a clear separation between personal and professional roles, as expected by KCPD policy and ethical law enforcement standards in Kansas. A further incorrect approach would be to immediately end the stop without further action simply because the individual is a friend, without any other justification. This is problematic as it bypasses the investigative process and potentially fails to address any observed traffic violations, which could be seen as dereliction of duty or preferential treatment, undermining the consistent enforcement of Kansas traffic laws. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear recognition of potential conflicts of interest, an immediate assessment of the impact on impartiality and public trust, and a proactive step to remove oneself from the situation if a conflict exists. This includes consulting departmental policy, seeking guidance from supervisors when necessary, and prioritizing the integrity of the law enforcement process above personal relationships. Question 13. System analysis indicates a KCPD officer, while on patrol in Kansas City, Missouri, witnesses a fellow officer engaging in behavior that appears to be a violation of departmental policy regarding the respectful treatment of citizens. The citizen involved seems distressed, but does not immediately lodge a formal complaint. What is the most ethically sound and procedurally compliant course of action for the witnessing officer? Option A. Advise the citizen to file a complaint later if they feel it is warranted, and make no immediate official report of the observed behavior. Option B. Immediately document all observations of the behavior and the citizen's reaction, and then initiate the formal internal affairs complaint process as per KCPD policy. Option C. Discreetly speak with the officer involved to understand their perspective and encourage them to correct their behavior without involving official channels. Option D. Conduct a personal, informal investigation to gather more information before deciding whether to report the incident through official channels. Correct answer is B. Immediately document all observations of the behavior and the citizen's reaction, and then initiate the formal internal affairs complaint process as per KCPD policy. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a perceived need for immediate action and the established protocols designed to ensure fairness, accuracy, and accountability within the Kansas City Police Department, KCPD. The officer must balance the urgency of the situation with the legal and ethical obligations to conduct a thorough and impartial investigation. This requires careful judgment to avoid compromising the integrity of the investigation or violating the rights of the individual involved. The best approach involves prioritizing the collection of objective evidence and adhering strictly to KCPD policy regarding the handling of sensitive information and potential misconduct. This means documenting all observations meticulously, securing any relevant physical evidence, and initiating the formal internal affairs complaint process without delay. This approach is correct because it upholds the principles of due process, ensures transparency, and provides a structured framework for investigating allegations of misconduct. It aligns with the ethical imperative to act with integrity and fairness, and the regulatory requirement to follow established procedures for internal investigations within the KCPD, which are designed to protect both the public and the officers involved by ensuring impartial review and appropriate action. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the citizen's concerns outright without proper documentation or investigation, based on a personal belief that the citizen might be unreliable. This fails to acknowledge the seriousness of the allegation and bypasses the established KCPD procedures for handling complaints, potentially leading to a failure to address genuine misconduct and eroding public trust. Another incorrect approach would be to confront the officer in question informally and without initiating the formal complaint process, perhaps to gauge their reaction or to resolve the matter without official scrutiny. This circumvents the established internal affairs procedures, lacks impartiality, and does not create a verifiable record of the complaint or its resolution, thereby failing to meet the KCPD regulatory and ethical obligations for accountability. A further incorrect approach would be to delay filing the formal complaint while attempting to gather additional, uncorroborated information independently. While diligence is important, delaying the official process can be perceived as an attempt to influence the outcome or to avoid initiating a potentially difficult investigation, which is ethically problematic and may violate KCPD policy on timely reporting of misconduct allegations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and procedures, particularly when dealing with allegations of misconduct. This framework involves 1. Recognizing the ethical and regulatory imperative to act impartially and with integrity. 2. Understanding and applying relevant departmental policies and procedures for complaint intake and investigation. 3. Prioritizing the collection of objective evidence and documentation. 4. Avoiding personal bias or prejudgment. 5. Ensuring timely and accurate reporting. 6. Seeking guidance from supervisors or internal affairs when uncertain. Question 14. System analysis indicates a KCPD officer observes a fellow officer who is not their direct subordinate, engaging in a clear violation of KCPD policy regarding the unauthorized use of department-issued equipment for personal gain while on duty in Kansas City, Missouri. The observing officer is aware of the policy and its implications for departmental integrity and public trust. What is the most ethically and professionally sound course of action for the observing officer? Option A. Ignore the violation to avoid potential conflict or repercussions within the department, assuming it is a minor infraction. Option B. Report the violation directly to a media outlet or a civilian oversight committee without first utilizing internal KCPD reporting procedures. Option C. Document the violation with specific details and report it through the appropriate KCPD channels, such as the chain of command or the Internal Affairs Division, in accordance with KCPD policy and the Missouri Post Code of Ethics. Option D. Confront the offending officer directly and informally, advising them to cease the behavior without initiating a formal report. The correct answer is C. Document the violation with specific details and report it through the appropriate KCPD channels, such as the chain of command or the Internal Affairs Division, in accordance with KCPD policy and the Missouri Post Code of Ethics. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the inherent tension between departmental policy, public trust, and the personal ethical obligations of an officer. The officer is faced with a situation where a direct violation of departmental policy is observed in a subordinate, potentially impacting the integrity of the KCPD and the public's perception of its officers. The need for careful judgment arises from the potential for both overreaction and underreaction to have significant negative consequences. Overreaction could lead to a breakdown in team cohesion and morale, while underreaction could foster a culture of impunity and erode public trust. The best professional approach involves a measured, policy-driven, and ethically sound response. This approach prioritizes adherence to established KCPD procedures for reporting misconduct, It involves documenting the observed violation accurately and reporting it through the designated chain of command or Internal Affairs Division, as outlined in KCPD policy and the Missouri Peace Officer Standards and Training, Post, Code of Ethics, which emphasizes integrity and accountability. This method ensures that the violation is addressed formally, impartially, and in accordance with established protocols, protecting the officer from accusations of favoritism or personal vendetta, while upholding the department's commitment to professional conduct. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the violation. This failure directly contravenes the ethical obligation to uphold the law and departmental standards, as well as the spirit of the Post Code of Ethics that mandates officers to report misconduct. By overlooking the infraction, the officer implicitly condones it, potentially contributing to a culture where such behavior is normalized, thereby damaging the KCPD reputation and public trust. Another incorrect approach would be to confront the subordinate officer directly and informally, without involving the proper reporting channels. While seemingly an attempt to resolve the issue quickly, this bypasses established disciplinary procedures. It risks creating an appearance of favoritism or bias, could lead to a defensive reaction from the subordinate that escalates the situation, and fails to create a formal record of the misconduct, thus not holding the officer accountable through the official KCPD disciplinary process. This also fails to meet the ethical imperative of ensuring all officers are held to the same professional standards. A final incorrect approach would be to report the violation to a supervisor outside the established chain of command or to external parties without first exhausting internal reporting mechanisms. This can undermine the authority of immediate supervisors, create interdepartmental friction, and may not be the most efficient or effective way to address the issue within the KCPD framework. It also risks violating KCPD internal reporting policies and could be seen as circumventing due process. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying the observed behavior, 2. Consulting relevant KCPD policies and the Missouri Post Code of Ethics, 3. Assessing the severity and potential impact of the violation, 4. Choosing the reporting mechanism that aligns with policy and ethical obligations, and 5. Documenting the action taken. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are based on established standards, not personal feelings or expediency, and that accountability is maintained. Question 15. Process analysis reveals that a Kansas City Police Department officer, while off-duty, encounters a close personal friend who is subsequently identified as a suspect in a minor misdemeanor investigation. The officer has direct knowledge of circumstances that could be crucial to the investigation. What is the most ethically and professionally responsible course of action for the officer to take? Option A. Continue with the investigation as normal, believing their personal relationship will not influence their judgment. Option B. Discuss the situation with a friend to gauge their involvement before reporting it to a supervisor. Option C. Proceed with the investigation discreetly, using their knowledge to gather information without involving other officers or supervisors. Option D. Immediately report the personal relationship and the officer's knowledge of the circumstances to their direct supervisor. The correct answer is D. Immediately report the personal relationship and the officer's knowledge of the circumstances to their direct supervisor. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a sworn duty to uphold the law and a personal relationship that could be perceived as influencing judgment. The officer must navigate the potential for bias, maintain public trust, and adhere to departmental policies and the Kansas Criminal Code. The core difficulty lies in balancing personal connections with professional integrity and the impartial application of justice. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately and transparently reporting the situation to a supervisor. This approach is correct because it upholds the principle of accountability and ensures that any potential conflict of interest is managed at a higher level. Kansas law and KCPD policy mandate reporting of potential conflicts to prevent even the appearance of impropriety and to ensure that investigations are conducted without bias. By informing a supervisor, the officer allows for an objective assessment of the situation and the assignment of the case to an officer who can proceed without any personal connection, thereby safeguarding the integrity of the investigation and the justice system. Incorrect approaches analysis. Failing to report the relationship and proceeding with the investigation as if nothing were amiss, is ethically unsound and violates departmental policy. This approach creates a significant risk of actual or perceived bias, undermining the credibility of the investigation and potentially leading to legal challenges regarding the evidence obtained or the outcome of the case. It demonstrates a failure to recognize and manage a conflict of interest, which is a cornerstone of professional conduct. Attempting to conduct a discreet investigation to avoid involving supervisors or other officers is also professionally unacceptable. A secretive approach further compounds the ethical breach by attempting to conceal a conflict of interest. It suggests a lack of integrity and a willingness to compromise professional standards for personal reasons, which can have severe consequences for the officer and the KCPD reputation. Discussing the situation with the relative involved before reporting it to a supervisor is also an improper approach. This action could be construed as attempting to influence the relative or gain information that could be used to manipulate the investigation. It prioritizes the personal relationship over the professional obligation to conduct an impartial investigation and report potential conflicts through the proper chain of command. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such dilemmas should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, accountability, and adherence to established policies and ethical codes. This involves 1. Identifying the potential conflict of interest, 2. Consulting relevant departmental policies and state laws, in this case, Kansas statutes and KCPD regulations concerning conflicts of interest and reporting procedures. 3. Immediately reporting the conflict to the appropriate supervisor. 4. Following the supervisor's directives regarding case reassignment or further action. 5. Maintaining objectivity and impartiality throughout all interactions. Question 16. The control framework reveals that a Kansas City Police Department, KCPD, officer has recently learned that a close personal friend, with whom they have a long-standing relationship, is currently involved in a minor ongoing investigation being handled by the KCPD. The officer has not been directly assigned to this investigation, but they are aware of its existence and the general nature of the inquiry. Considering the KCPD commitment to ethical conduct and impartiality, what is the most appropriate course of action for the officer? Option A. Continue to perform all official duties as usual, assuming their personal relationship will not influence their professional judgment, and avoid discussing the investigation with a friend. Option B. Discreetly attempt to gather information about the investigation through unofficial channels to ensure their friend is not in serious trouble, without informing their supervisor. Option C. Immediately report the personal relationship and the officer's awareness of the investigation to their direct supervisor, and request to be recused from any duties that might indirectly or directly involve the friend or the investigation. Option D. Advise the friend of the investigation and offer to provide general advice on how to navigate the KCPD procedures, without revealing specific details of the inquiry. Correct answer is C. Immediately report the personal relationship and the officer's awareness of the investigation to their direct supervisor, and request to be recused from any duties that might indirectly or directly involve the friend or the investigation. Explanation. The control framework reveals a situation where a Kansas City Police Department, KCPD, officer faces a conflict between departmental policy and a personal relationship. This scenario is professionally challenging because it tests the officer's integrity, impartiality, and adherence to the KCPD Code of Conduct. The officer must navigate the potential for perceived or actual bias, which can erode public trust and compromise the fairness of law enforcement actions. Careful judgment is required to uphold the principles of equal treatment and avoid conflicts of interest. The best professional practice involves immediately reporting the personal relationship to a supervisor and recusing oneself from any official duties that could involve the individual. This approach is correct because it aligns with the KCPD established policies on conflicts of interest and ethical conduct, which mandate transparency and the avoidance of situations that could compromise objectivity. By reporting and recusing, the officer demonstrates a commitment to departmental integrity and ensures that official actions are not influenced by personal connections, thereby safeguarding the public's trust in the KCPD. An approach that involves continuing to interact with the individual in an official capacity while attempting to remain impartial is professionally unacceptable. This fails to address the inherent risk of bias, both perceived and actual, and violates the principle of avoiding conflicts of interest. It creates a situation where the officer's judgment could be questioned, regardless of their actual intent, and undermines the public's confidence in the impartiality of law enforcement. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to ignore the relationship and continue with official duties as if nothing has changed. This demonstrates a disregard for departmental policy and ethical standards. It not only creates a significant conflict of interest, but also exposes the officer and the department to potential legal and disciplinary repercussions. Such inaction can be interpreted as an attempt to conceal a conflict, further damaging credibility. Finally, an approach that involves discussing the situation with the individual and agreeing to handle matters discreetly is also professionally unacceptable. This suggests a willingness to circumvent established procedures and potentially engage in preferential treatment or the concealment of information. It prioritizes the personal relationship over the officer's duty to uphold the law impartially and transparently, which is a fundamental ethical failure. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to departmental policy and ethical guidelines. This involves recognizing potential conflicts of interest, understanding the implications of personal relationships on professional duties, and proactively seeking guidance from supervisors when such situations arise. Transparency, impartiality, and the avoidance of even the appearance of impropriety are paramount in maintaining public trust and upholding the integrity of the KCPD. Question 17. The performance metrics show a consistent increase in average response times for domestic disturbance calls within the Kansas City Police Department, KCPD, over the past quarter. What is the most appropriate and ethically sound course of action for KCPD leadership to address this trend? Option A. Advise officers to prioritize speed over thoroughness when responding to domestic disturbance calls to bring response times back within acceptable limits. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive review of call data, patrol deployment strategies, and staffing levels to identify the root causes of the increased response times and develop targeted solutions. Option C. Attribute the increase in response times to external factors and seasonal variation, and monitor the metrics without further immediate investigation. Option D. Immediately implement a policy of increased disciplinary actions for any officer whose response time exceeds the previous quarter's average, regardless of the circumstances of the call. Correct answer is B. Initiate a comprehensive review of call data, patrol deployment strategies, and staffing levels to identify the root causes of the increased response times and develop targeted solutions. Explanation. The performance metrics show a concerning trend in response times for domestic disturbance calls within the Kansas City Police Department, KCPD. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts public safety and the department's accountability. Officers are expected to respond promptly to emergencies, and a consistent delay, even if seemingly minor on average, could have severe consequences for victims. The ethical imperative is to serve and protect the community effectively, which includes timely intervention. Balancing operational demands with the need for thoroughness and officer safety is a constant challenge. The best approach involves a proactive and data-driven investigation into the root causes of the increased response times. This means not just acknowledging the metrics, but actively seeking to understand why they are changing. This approach is correct because it aligns with the KCPD duty to provide efficient and effective law enforcement services as mandated by Kansas law, which emphasizes public safety and responsible resource allocation. It also upholds ethical principles of accountability and continuous improvement. By analyzing call data, patrol patterns, staffing levels, and potential external factors, the department can identify specific areas for improvement, such as reallocating resources, optimizing patrol routes, or implementing new technologies. This systematic investigation ensures that any proposed solutions are evidence-based and targeted, rather than reactive or superficial. An approach that focuses solely on reprimanding officers for not meeting the previous benchmarks without understanding the underlying issues is professionally unacceptable. This fails to address the systemic problems that may be contributing to the delays and can lead to decreased morale and a perception of unfairness. It ignores the possibility that external factors or increased call volume might be the cause, rather than individual officer performance. Another unacceptable approach is to dismiss the performance metrics as an anomaly or a statistical fluctuation without further investigation. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to uphold the department's responsibility to monitor and improve its services. It risks allowing a potentially serious issue to persist, thereby compromising public safety. Finally, an approach that involves simply increasing the number of officers on patrol without a strategic analysis of where and when they are needed is inefficient and may not solve the problem. While more officers might seem like a solution, without understanding the specific bottlenecks or reasons for delays, this could be a misallocation of resources and may not lead to a significant improvement in response times. Professionals should approach such situations by first acknowledging the data and its potential implications. Then, they should initiate a comprehensive review process that involves data analysis, consultation with officers on the ground, and consideration of all relevant operational factors. This data-informed, systematic approach allows for the development of targeted and effective solutions that uphold both legal obligations and ethical responsibilities to the community. Question 18. The monitoring system demonstrates an officer accessing footage of a private citizen who is not currently under investigation for any crime, but who the officer knows personally. The officer claims they were just checking in to ensure the individual was safe after a recent personal interaction. What is the most appropriate course of action for the officer in this situation, according to Kansas City Police Department, KCPD guidelines? Option A. Delete the access log for the footage and refrain from mentioning the incident to anyone. Option B. Assume the access was permissible as the intention was to ensure the individual's safety and take no further action. Option C. Confront the individual directly about the officer's concerns without reporting the system access to a supervisor. Option D. Immediately report the access of the monitoring system to a supervisor and initiate the formal documentation process for the incident. Correct answer is D. Immediately report the access of the monitoring system to a supervisor and initiate the formal documentation process for the incident. Explanation. The monitoring system demonstrates a potential breach of privacy and departmental policy. This scenario is professionally challenging because it pits the need for effective law enforcement and public safety against the fundamental rights of individuals and the integrity of departmental data. Officers are entrusted with significant power, and the misuse of that power, even if perceived as minor or for a seemingly justifiable reason, erodes public trust and can have legal repercussions. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing interests. The best professional practice involves immediately reporting the observed activity to a supervisor and initiating the formal documentation process. This approach is correct because it adheres to the Kansas City Police Department's, KCPD, established policies regarding the use of surveillance technology and data access. Specifically, KCPD policy mandates that any unauthorized access or use of the monitoring system, or any information obtained through it, must be reported. This ensures transparency, allows for proper investigation into potential policy violations, and protects the department from liability. It also upholds the ethical principle of accountability, ensuring that all actions are subject to oversight. Failing to report the activity, even with the intention of avoiding trouble or because the observed behavior seemed minor, constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach violates KCPD policy by circumventing the required reporting procedures for any use of the monitoring system. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of integrity and a disregard for departmental rules designed to protect privacy and prevent abuse of power. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the observation as insignificant and take no action. This is professionally unacceptable because it ignores a potential violation of policy and privacy. Even if the observed behavior was not criminal, the unauthorized access and use of the monitoring system itself is a breach. This approach fails to uphold the duty of an officer to report all observed improprieties and can set a dangerous precedent for future misconduct. Finally, confronting the individual directly without reporting the observation or involving a supervisor is also professionally unsound. While it might seem like a direct way to address the situation, it bypasses established departmental procedures for handling potential policy violations and privacy breaches. This can lead to inconsistent enforcement, potential escalation of the situation without proper support, and a failure to create an official record of the event, which is crucial for accountability and departmental review. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to departmental policy and ethical conduct. This involves recognizing potential policy violations, understanding the implications of unauthorized data access, and consistently following established reporting and documentation procedures. When in doubt, seeking guidance from a supervisor is always the appropriate course of action. Question 19. System analysis indicates a Kansas City Police Department, KCPD, officer has learned that a close personal friend is potentially involved in a criminal investigation that the officer may be assigned to. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action for the officer to take? Option A. Proceed with the investigation as assigned, relying on their personal integrity to remain impartial. Option B. Contact the friend to subtly inquire about their knowledge of any ongoing investigations. Option C. Immediately report the personal relationship and potential conflict of interest to their direct supervisor. Option D. Discreetly attempt to gather information about the investigation to assess the friend's potential involvement without reporting it. The correct answer is C. Immediately report the personal relationship and potential conflict of interest to their direct supervisor. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge for a Kansas City Police Department, KCPD, officer due to the inherent conflict between a personal relationship and official duties, specifically concerning the potential for bias and the erosion of public trust. The officer's knowledge of a potential ongoing investigation involving a close friend creates a situation where impartiality is compromised, and the integrity of the investigation could be jeopardized. Careful judgment is required to navigate this ethical minefield and uphold the KCPD commitment to fairness and accountability. The best professional approach involves immediate and transparent disclosure of the personal relationship to a supervisor. This approach is correct because it adheres to fundamental ethical principles of integrity, impartiality, and accountability, which are paramount in law enforcement. By reporting the conflict, the officer demonstrates a commitment to avoiding even the appearance of impropriety and ensures that the investigation can proceed without undue influence or suspicion of bias. This aligns with the KCPD internal policies and general law enforcement ethical standards that mandate officers to report any circumstances that could compromise their objectivity or create a conflict of interest. This proactive step allows for appropriate measures to be taken, such as reassigning the investigation or implementing enhanced oversight, thereby safeguarding the integrity of the process and maintaining public confidence. An incorrect approach would be to remain silent and attempt to handle the situation independently, hoping to maintain objectivity. This is professionally unacceptable because it violates the duty to report conflicts of interest and creates a significant risk of actual or perceived bias. The officer's personal connection could unconsciously influence their actions or decisions, even with the best intentions. Furthermore, if the relationship becomes known later, it could lead to accusations of obstruction of justice or a cover-up, severely damaging the officer's career and the KCPD reputation. Another incorrect approach would be to subtly steer the investigation away from the friend without formally reporting the conflict. This is ethically flawed as it constitutes a deliberate manipulation of an official process for personal reasons, even if seemingly benign. It undermines the principle of equal application of the law and can be construed as a form of misconduct. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to discuss the investigation with the friend to warn them or gauge their involvement. This is a severe breach of protocol and confidentiality. It directly compromises the integrity of the investigation, potentially allowing the friend to evade detection or destroy evidence, and is a clear violation of KCPD policies regarding investigative secrecy and professional conduct. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the KCPD Code of Conduct and Ethics policies. When faced with a potential conflict of interest, an officer should first identify the nature of the conflict and its potential impact on their duties. The next step is to consult relevant policies and seek guidance from a supervisor or the department's ethics officer. Transparency and prompt reporting are almost always the most prudent course of action, allowing the department to manage the situation effectively and ethically. Question 20. System analysis indicates a KCPD officer, while conducting a financial fraud investigation in Kansas City, Missouri, uncovers information about a company that is a target of the investigation. This information, if acted upon quickly, presents a unique and potentially lucrative investment opportunity for the officer personally. The officer believes this investment would not compromise the investigation's integrity, as the information is not directly related to the evidence being gathered, but rather a separate market trend identified through the investigation's data analysis. The officer is considering whether to pursue this investment. If the officer invests $5,000 and the investment grows by 15% within 6 months, what would be the total value of the officer's investment at that time? Option A, $6,000. Option B, $5,750. Option C, $5,500. Option D, $5,150. The correct answer is B, $5,750. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Kansas City Police Department (KCPD) officer involving the potential misuse of department resources and the ethical implications of personal gain derived from official duties. The officer is faced with a situation where a personal financial opportunity arises directly from information obtained during an official investigation. Balancing the duty to uphold the law and departmental integrity with a personal financial interest requires careful judgment and adherence to strict ethical guidelines and KCPD policy. The core challenge lies in preventing even the appearance of impropriety and ensuring that public trust is maintained. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately disclosing the potential conflict of interest to a supervisor and recusing oneself from any further involvement in the investigation or related activities that could benefit from the personal investment opportunity. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with KCPD ethical standards and policies regarding conflicts of interest, which mandate transparency and the avoidance of situations where personal interests could compromise official duties. By reporting the situation, the officer demonstrates integrity and allows for proper oversight and management of the conflict, thereby protecting both the investigation's integrity and the department's reputation. This proactive disclosure prevents any perception of impropriety or exploitation of official information for personal enrichment. Incorrect approach is analysis. Pursuing the investment without disclosure, while believing it would not affect the investigation, is professionally unacceptable. This fails to acknowledge the appearance of impropriety and violates KCPD policy on conflicts of interest. Even if the officer's intentions are pure, the perception of using insider information for personal gain erodes public trust and can undermine the investigation's credibility. Accepting the investment and then disclosing it after the fact is also professionally unacceptable. This approach is flawed because it implies a willingness to engage in a potentially compromising situation before seeking guidance. Disclosure should be proactive, not reactive, and waiting until after the investment is made suggests a lack of commitment to ethical principles from the outset. Seeking advice from a colleague rather than a supervisor is professionally unacceptable. While collegial advice can be helpful, official conflicts of interest require reporting to the chain of command. A supervisor is authorized and responsible for making decisions regarding conflicts of interest and ensuring compliance with KCPD policy, whereas a colleague may not have the full understanding or authority to provide appropriate guidance. Professional reasoning. Professionals in law enforcement must operate under a strict code of ethics that prioritizes public service and integrity above personal gain. When faced with a potential conflict of interest, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the potential conflict. Recognize when personal interests could influence or appear to influence official duties. 2. Consulting policy. Review relevant departmental policies and ethical guidelines. 3. Proactive disclosure. Immediately report the situation to the appropriate supervisor. 4. Recusal. Step away from any duties or decisions related to the conflict. 5. Seeking guidance. Follow the supervisor's instructions and departmental procedures for managing the conflict. This structured approach ensures that decisions are made transparently, ethically, and in accordance with regulatory requirements, thereby safeguarding the integrity of the department and public trust.